All right, so let's go ahead and go over this. So what I want to do, this is a brainstorm. This is kind of seeing, so we're talking about factors that affect an ecosystem today. So I'm going to brainstorm ones that you guys kind of already know about. Thank you. So Judy, you're kind of new C. You are, let me look so I forget. You're next to Brittany. In the back. Thank you. So if you guys notice at the bottom, there's a thing that says space to record. So we're going to write down what we're all brainstorming together about what kind of factors might change or affect an ecosystem. So I want to hear one from each person, because I saw you guys all wrote down something. You all had really good ideas. So who wants to go first? Brittany, what do you think of? Give me one.
I said
Climate change. Nice, that's a good one. How might climate change affect what a forest might look like? Or how might it hurt the ecosystem? Yeah, absolutely. It changed the weather patterns. That would have a really big impact. And we're going to talk about what that looks like as part of this unit. Actually, that's another one. Yeah, what about them? What might change them? That's a really good point. What might we do to a forest that would hurt a habitat? We could think about our Chernobyl reading. Yeah, if we cut down trees. Oops. So everyone should be writing these down too. Cut down trees, and that might change the habitat. Absolutely. Which is not leaving them with a place to live. Naya, what do you got? Forest fires. Yeah. That would definitely change how a forest looks. And they're not always bad. But we've seen on the news over the past couple of years, they're getting pretty out of control. So they're good, but not when they're like that. So we'll talk about why that's happening. Yeah.
bad air.
Bad air. Really good point. How might that change or influence a forest? Yeah, it might be hard for the animals to breathe. And the plants, they also take in air. So it might harm them too. It's a really good point. Who's got another one? And we got 11 people in this class. So we need 5 more. Oh wait, I can't do math. We need 7 more. Alicia. Hurricanes, good point. Hurricanes will definitely impact a forest. Alright, who's got another? We need 6 more. Not from the same people. Kaja, what do you think?
Oh,
Your
a
voice.
flood.
A flood, yeah. Flood would definitely change. Definitely is an impact that we're going to talk about. Jill, what do you think, sir?
I said cut down trees.
All right, I'll put a star next to that. That's a good point. Absolutely cut down trees. All right, we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Janae. A lightning storm. Absolutely. So a trend I'm noticing is we're talking about a lot of weather events, and that's a really good point. Another part of factors isn't just things that are bad for a forest, but things that are good too. So what might happen to a forest that's a good thing, or what do organisms in a forest need to be healthy? What do you think, Christy?
Water.
Water, yep. So water definitely matters. That's a factor we'll talk about. Kind of the other ones. What? Animals. So we could say the animals, what types of animals live there? I'll write animals for now. Now your name is yours. Sunlight, yeah. Sunlight really matters in a forest, and it's definitely a factor that affects an ecosystem. Because I'm guessing one of the reasons you guys thought there's no animals in the deep ocean is because there's no sunlight down there. And that definitely changes the way things work. Because it's really hard for the sun, the light, to get through that much water. It kind of, the light gets less and less at every level.
Only like certain
weird like adaptations, right? Like in Finding Nemo, there's that fish with that light, and he can live in the deep ocean, but he needed some crazy adaptation so he could see down there when there wasn't any sunlight. So we're going to learn about a lot of those really cool examples. Does anyone have any questions or any more to add? Fabulous. So this is what we're going to talk about with our notes. It is PowerPoint notes. What's that?
Her hand was up.
Oh, your hands are so much. How can I see that? No, you're not. Overpopulation, totally. That's a great last one to put in there. Overpopulation. All right, so I'll leave this up for folks that haven't written all these down yet. And I'm going to go ahead and pass out our PowerPoint notes.
What kind of question?
Yeah. I've been talking them out. Can we both have numeric? Please do not behave like that in this classroom. When she comes back. You can. Thank you. Awesome. Okay. All right, ladies and gents. So, for PowerPoint notes, remember we're filling in when there's a blank definition. So there will be a bunch of these on the slides. There's also a couple think, pair, shares in this PowerPoint. And that's when I want you to be writing down what your classmates are saying, what their responses are to that think, pair, share. So everyone's head should be up, and everyone should be focused. Lights off doesn't mean sleeping. And we'll go ahead and start. So this is our introduction to ecology. Here's our first slide. I missed your list, so you have it. All right. So what is ecology? Will I block anyone if I stand here? Fun, right? Okay. So ecology is the study of relationships and interactions between organisms, so that's our living things that we learned about in bio, and their environment. So we're looking at what organisms do with each other and how they interact with the space that they live in. So eco is interesting. Remember we broke down biology, into bio means life, and logi means to study. But you can do that for ecology too. So in Greek, eco means home. So we're literally studying an animal's home. So I'll leave this up for another minute so you guys can get this definition down. Go ahead and switch. So the factors we're talking about today are abiotic versus biotic factors. So an environment is made up of both living elements and non-living elements. Can someone remind me our definition of what living means? How do we know something would be a living element? Yeah, Brittany. Yeah, they've got all the 8 characteristics of living things. Awesome. That is merit-worthy. Yep, and how would we know that something is a non-living piece? What do you guys think? How would we know something's non-living in here? know, or how do we know when something is non-living? If our definition of living things is they have all 8 characteristics, what do we think for non-living? What do you think, Shania?
I think that one's when something was like, it never had all of the
Yeah, exactly. It's non-living if it never had all of the 8 characteristics. So organisms interact with living things, so they interact with other organisms, or they interact with non-living parts of their environment. So we call these two abiotic factors and biotic factors. One means living and one means non-living. And I'll give you guys those definitions in a moment. All right, so here's abiotic. So this is our non-living elements in our ecosystem. That A is something we call a prefix, and it always means without. So we've talked about sexual and asexual reproduction, where sexual is we need both genders, and asexual is without sex. We don't need both to reproduce. So abiotic is without life. So some examples, and you guys brought up a lot of these, which is awesome. We got sunlight in our brainstorm, and we got water in our brainstorm, and we had air quality. So that's our carbon dioxide and our oxygen. So I'll leave this up for another minute so you guys can get that definition down. And those last 2 examples. So here's our first think, pair, share. What other abiotic factors can you think of that exist in an ecosystem? So think about our forest. We've got our sunlight coming in, we've got our air, and we've got our water. What else is in there? Talk to each other first. I'm going to give you guys 30 seconds, and then I'll call on you. Okay, so guys, come back to me. So I need eyes and ears, and I want to hear what you guys thought. So raise your hand. What are some ideas? Ajay, what do you think? Dirt. That is absolutely and a really important abiotic factor. Did anyone think of another? Alicia?
Water.
Yeah, weather. Totally. Janai, do you have a different one? Awesome. Those are 2. Nice job. Oh, keep walking away from the keyboard. Yeah. So we got temperature. So temperature is our weather, right? It's how hot or cold the air is going to be. And we got precipitation. That means how much rainfall we're getting. Or if it's cold, how much snow we're getting. So weather is absolutely an abiotic factor. And soil, or dirt. So you guys got them. I'll leave them up for a moment so you guys can record that. The ladies up front, don't be silent. Kemley, just demerit number 2. You need to put it away. You're only doing science right now. Okay. So here's our biotic factors. So biotic factors is from our biology. It's all living things in an environment. So here's our 5 kingdoms. We got bacteria, animals, plants, fungi, it's our mushrooms or our molds, and we got our protists, which are funky organisms that don't fit in any categories. So I'll give you guys a moment to get the definition and those last 3. So our biotic factors are always going to be the ones that have all 8 characteristics of life, and they're going to be in one of these categories. We're not going to get too funky. I will never get into protists with you guys, because they're really weird. But we will absolutely talk about bacteria, and we'll talk about animals and plants. I'll give you guys another 20 seconds. Does anyone have any questions so far?
Hey, can you go back to the last 5?
That guy?
Yeah.
Okay. Give you 10 seconds. And guys, if you have trouble catching up with them, I can always print you a copy of the PowerPoint if I'm going too fast. I'm definitely happy to do that. Okay. So here's our second thing right there. Can you think of some examples of how biotic factors, so how living things, might affect an ecosystem? We brainstormed a bunch of good ones. So guys, turn to your partner. I'll give you 30 seconds to chat. What do you think are some living things that might affect an ecosystem? Or more of how. Think about how they'll affect. So not just what they are, but what they might do.
I have a question. Can I already have some of these on here?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Not trying notes, but these are quick, so we'll be done in the next 10 minutes. Okay, guys, come back to me. I need eyes and ears. What do you guys think? How might some living things affect an ecosystem? Ajane, what do you think?
Human.
What might humans do?
Like, litter.
Yeah, humans might pollute. They might get trash in there, litter. Janae, what's another one? Say what? Yeah, humans might create new landforms. Absolutely. We got our big, backhoes in there, and we start doing construction, start building some buildings. That's going to change the landscape. Kaija, what's another?
Stop trees from growing.
Yeah, how will we stop trees from growing? Yeah, humans might cut down trees, and sometimes we'll put concrete down, and that's going to prevent trees from growing back. So those are both really good points. I'll show you some answers. So here's how our big effects, these are our good effects. You guys talk about some bad ones, but there's good ones too. So our good effects, our plants provide oxygen, they provide food, and they provide shelter for animals that live in trees, especially. Animals provide food. Fungi and bacteria, they break down dead organisms. And we'll talk about what that means when we talk about our food web. And bacteria, can cause disease. So I'll give you guys a moment to get those. But these are the kinds of things that we'll talk about in ecology. Because ecology is all about how things are interacting and how one part of an environment is affecting another part. All right, 10 more seconds on this slide. Perfect, thank you. Okay. So when we talk about ecology, just like we had our organization of living things, we also have levels of ecology. So these are then from least to most complex. So go ahead and write them down, and then we'll talk about each one. You'll notice that we start with organism, and that's where we left off in our levels of organization of living things. Right? We started with our atom, we built up to our molecule, and then our cell, and then our tissues, and organ system. And once we had an organism, we had a whole living thing. Now we can go even bigger and talk about where that thing lives. So we'll go through what these mean in a moment, but they're organism, population, community, ecosystem, biome, and biosphere, which is the whole Earth, the part that we live in anyway. Does anyone need more time on this slide? Raise a hand. Okay, fabulous. All right. So why do we need levels of organization in ecology? Well, it's because ecologists can ask different types of questions at each level. And because ecologists can look at how the different levels are interacting with each other. So one example of that is our Chernobyl article, where we had one organism, we had one species, the humans, leave, and it had an enormous impact on the whole place. We not only had one species coming back, but we had a whole bunch of organisms coming back, and the landscape totally changed. The trees grew out of the concrete, and we had a forest again. So 2 examples of how scientists will be looking at a changing ecosystem, Ajne,
Yes.
is we had a really, really warm winter this winter. And it probably affected a lot of animals because they're not used to that. So scientists could ask, how did the warm winter this year affect Canadian geese migration? So we're just talking about something small. We're talking about one species. Or raise your hand. Or we can talk about how did the warm winter affect all the animals in New England. So we really can look at it at different levels. Yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Did the weather affect the bears? No, like bears have it in the winter time. Did it affect them?
Yeah, I'm sure it did. Sometimes. So it's interesting with bears. When animals migrate, there's 2 things that might happen. They either migrate because they sense the sunlight decreasing, the days getting shorter, and that's what bears do, so bears don't get super confused. But there's other animals that sense the temperature, especially plants, and so in warm winters, those get really confused. So plants might bud too early, and then all of a sudden it frosts, and it kills the plant for that entire year. So it's pretty crazy when we have a warm winter. It has some really big impacts. Yeah. All right, so here's our first level, our organisms. So organism is just one living thing, one individual living thing. So as examples, a squirrel, or a red maple, ladies, or a human. When you get a demerit, please be silent. I've asked you twice, and I should have given you a demerit earlier. Okay. So the reason I put these crazy words next to them, we won't get too into this, but this is their scientific name. Because scientists like to organize things into categories. It helps them explain the world around them. So their second name is their species name. In their first name, so for humans, our species is sapiens, and our first name is Homo. So that's like our family name, and that's what all our ancestors are called, which is pretty interesting. So when we get into evolution, we'll talk about that a little bit more. Brittany, you have a question? And 9. Yeah, we're going to do 9 today. Okay. Population is a group of organisms of one species that live in the same area and interact with one another. So one example, have any of you been to the Blue Hills Reservation? Nice. So for those of you who don't know it, it's south of Quincy, so it's like a little bit south of Boston. And it's this giant green area because it's all preserved forest. So a population in there would be one species, so we could talk about gray squirrels, and it's all the gray squirrels that live in that area. That's our population. So I'll give you guys a moment, because that is a long definition. Yeah. You guys still, so, do you guys know the schedule today?
No.
Oh, okay. So, it's Friday schedule, except all your classes are an hour instead of 45 minutes. Because that way, folks that have an interim today, they're not stuck racing through it in 45 minutes. They have a whole hour to take it. So, it's normal schedule, and what we took out is town meeting. So instead of like getting out at 12:30 and going to town meeting, we're going to get out at 1:30 and you just go home.
So we still got out of it.
Yeah, so we got an hour of every class today. I know, I'm sorry. I was wondering why you guys were ready to leave.
Man,
Yeah. Yeah.
I look bright.
Do you really?
Yeah.
Awesome.
1%.
All right. Does anyone raise your hand if you still need this slide? Good? Okay. Our community is all of the populations, so all of our species that live in the same area and interact with one another. So an example is all of the species that live in the Blue Hills Reservation. Can someone help me out with what a species is? Because I don't think we've talked about it yet in this class. What would you say a species is? Okay, good. So we should go over this. So a species is one type of animal. So it's like its own type. And the way we define it is it means that species can only reproduce, can only have babies of that same species. That's how we define it. Does that make sense? When I'm talking about a species, we know what I mean? Okay. Alright, I'll give you guys another 20 seconds on this slide to get the definition down. So we're going up, yep, so we're at it 9. So we're going up in complexity. So we started with just one organism, and then we went to all of that species in an area, and now we're going to all the living things in that area. Now we're adding one more thing. So now we've got an ecosystem, and what we've added is our non-living things. So our definition is all the living organisms in an area, and the non-living aspects of that environment as well. So that's where we can talk about the whole Blue Hills Reservation. So our community was all the living things in there. But now, if we talk about the ecosystem, we're talking about the air around it, we're talking about the water that flows through it, and we're talking about the soil and the rock in it. So that's what we've added when we go to an ecosystem. We're adding all those pieces.
I think class is over.
It's over at 9 today.
We have like 4 minutes left.
I don't think it's 8:55. Is it?
Yep, 8:56 actually.